Alright, this video is going to go over the quiz from Friday. I made the original version of this video had no sound, so if you watched that video and there was no sound, I apologize for that. I'm going to go through number 1 through 10 pretty quickly because they're just knowing the identities. However, I'll talk about some ways to maybe remember these things. Okay, number 1, sine squared x. That's very simple. Number 2, this is the cotangent of pi over 2 minus x. Okay, so pi over 2 minus x is the complement of the angle x. This is cotangent, so this is tangent. Many people had trouble with that on the quiz. They just weren't putting cotangent with tangent. They were doing other things. 1 over cosine is secant. You should know that. Sine is odd. So sine of the opposite of x is the opposite of sine of x. Okay? Remember, odd functions, f of the opposite of x equals negative f of x. Secant of pi over 2 minus x, well, again, this is one of those co-functions, so the answer is the cosecant of x. Number 6. Blank plus 1 is cosecant squared x. I'm going to start with the original sine squared x plus cosine squared x equals 1. Okay, I want cosecant squared on the right side, so I'm going to divide everything by sine squared. Yep, that's what I want. So I get 1. Here's the 1 right here. Plus, that's cotangent squared. So this would be cotangent squared x. Number 7, cosine of the opposite of x. Cosine is even, so this is cosine of x. Number 8, this is one of those cofunctions. This is cosine, so this is sine of x. Number 9, same as number 6, except I'm going to divide through by cosine instead of sine, because I want a secant squared over here, and so this is actually 1. And number 10, cosine over sine is cotangent of x. Okay, so all identities you really need to know. You need to study them, but you need to remember where they came from because that's going to help you remember. All right, we go on to the 2 simplifies. First one was probably harder than the second one. So you look at number 11, you're like, what do I do? So do something. So I'm going to go ahead and change everything to sine and cosine, okay? And I have to make sure I do all that correctly. Cosine over sine plus sine over cosine over 1 over sine squared theta, okay? Now what I see is that this is dividing by a fraction. So I'm going to turn that into multiplying by the reciprocal. So cosine over sine plus sine cosine, multiply that whole thing by sine squared theta. All right, now I'm going to distribute the sine squareds in. And when I do that, if I distribute this into this, I see that one of the signs cancels. So I'm left with sine theta, cosine theta, and then plus here, sine cubed theta over cosine of theta. Okay? Now, what do I see? Well, it's a little unclear. How about we find a common denominator here? Okay, the question is, are we going where we want to go here? So I'm going to multiply this by cosine over cosine. So I get something like that. So I end up with sine theta cosine squared theta plus sine cubed theta over cosine squared theta. Okay, so this is not really going anywhere very well. What can I do next? I think that, maybe I should have done this before, I can change cosine squared into sine squared. 1 minus sine squared. So I'm going to do sine theta times 1 minus 1 minus sine squared theta plus sine cubed theta over cosine squared theta. Okay? Now I'm going to distribute There's probably easier ways to do this. I feel like I'm making this much harder than it is. Sometimes that happens. What is going on? So I'm going to distribute, and I get and I see an error. This should not be cosine squared. This should be cosine. Just straight up cosine. That's going to help us because I'm going to end up with sine over cosine ultimately. So this is cosine. Yeah. And then take this out of there. Okay. So what you see is that this cancels. I'm left with sine over cosine, and that is equal to tangent of theta. So there might be other ways to get there, but the answer, the simplified answer to number 11 is tangent of theta. Okay, now we do number 12. First thing is you needed to basically use the co-function identity of secant of 90 degrees minus a is just the cosecant of a. Some of you didn't know that, and that made it very, very difficult to continue. Minus, well, I'm going to use the fact that cosine is odd to change this to the cosine of a times the cotangent of a. Okay, now let's change cotangent into, in fact, let's change all this into sine and cosine. So this is cosine a, and this would be cosine a over sine a. Okay? This is because the cotangent is equal to cosine over sine. All right, now I have one denominator. I'm going to go ahead and multiply out the top here, and this is over sine of a. Well, 1 minus cosine squared of a is sine squared of a over sine of a, and my final answer is sine of a.